play you're about to see is based on the trial of a murder case and treats the facts of violent death as frankly as they were treated in the original court. Details of the trial have been condensed from contemporary sources, but scenes outside the courtroom are a mixture of fact and conjecture. Before 1898, a prisoner was not allowed to give evidence. This seems extraordinary to us, but in fact it was supposed to have been in the prisoner's best interest. All the same, there are some cases when one can't help feeling that the whole truth could only have been known if the prisoner had been allowed to speak. For example, Kate Webster. She must have been one of the most extraordinary people ever to come on trial in here. Kate was about 30, Irish, a maidservant. She was accused of murdering her employer. In that period, we're talking of 1879, that was unusual enough. But the horror of the case is what is alleged to have happened afterwards. It was for the jury here to decide whether Kate Webster was a rather simple, abused, misled, provoked young woman, or a monster. She was certainly one or the other. What impression they'd have got had they heard her, that we shall never know. Her defence was led by Mr. Warner Slay. Kate Webster herself offered, and I quote, her heartfelt thanks and gratitude to him, as she did to her solicitor, Mr. O'Brien. The prosecution was headed by the Solicitor General, Sir Harding Giffard. He was the leading lawyer of his day. The judge, the Honourable Mr. Justice Denman, was a model of fairness and common sense. There was no suggestion that the arguments for and against the prisoner weren't fairly put. By all accounts, she impressed the jury. There's no doubt there was something about her. Possibly the man who, by the end of the case, knew most about Kate Webster was Father Menery, the Roman Catholic chaplain of Wandsworth Prison. It is said that after he'd taken her last confession, he was never the same man again. It was the sheer horror of the crime that had given immortality to the name of Kate Webster.
And the accused lived at the time we are concerned with at number 2 Mayfield Cottages in Richmond. She had been employed there as a servant since January of this year by the deceased Mrs. Thomas, a widowed lady of about 60 years of age. On the night of Sunday, the 2nd of March, Mrs. Thomas attended the Presbyterian Church at Richmond. She was never again seen alive. 2 days later, on the afternoon of Tuesday, the 4th of March, the accused went to tea with a Mr. and Mrs. Porter who live in Hammersmith. She told them that she was now called Mrs. Thomas, that she was a widow, and that she had inherited some money and a house in Richmond. Later, Mr. Porter and his son walked with the accused to a public house. She had brought to the Porter's house a black bag, a perfectly normal black bag, of the kind you wouldn't remark twice. Mr. Porter and his son shared the task of carrying this bag to the public house. The accused then bought the Porters a drink and went out, she said, to visit a friend in Barnes. She took the bag with her. But when she returned some 20 minutes later, she no longer had the bag. The boy then escorted the accused back to Richmond while his father went to his own home. And at number 2 Mayfield Cottages, in the home of the real Mrs. Thomas, there was another package for the boy, Robert Porter, to carry. A box this time.
Then I helped to carry the box, sir. It was corded up like.
And where did you carry it to?
To Richmond Bridge, sir.
And then what happened?
She said she had a friend coming to help her, and I could go on. So I started to walk across the bridge. Then I heard this splash.
You heard a splash?
Yes. Then Kate ran after me.
You mean the accused?
Yes, sir. She ran after me and said she'd seen a friend and I could go back home.
And did she still have the box with her?
No, sir.
And did you return home?
No, sir. The last train had gone and she hadn't enough money for a cab, sir. So I went back and spent the night in her house.
In Mrs. Thomas's house? The real Mrs. Thomas?
Yes, sir.
Did she show you what was in the box? Or the black bag?
No, sir. But they were heavy.
No more questions, my lord.
Mr. Slay?
Thank you, my lord. Tell me, Robert, how long have you known Kate?
She used to live next door to us about 5 or 6 years ago. She used to come and play with my sister.
How old was your sister at that time?
Between 3 and 4, sir. She's died since then.
I'm sorry to hear that. But the accused, whom you call Kate, she was always kind to your sister? Very kind?
Yes, sir.
Let me take you back to the night of the 4th of March, when you heard that splash in the river. You are certain that splash was caused by the box falling in?
No, sir.
What do you think it was then, Robert? That splash?
I thought it was a barge, sir. It was dark and I couldn't see.
Obviously, it would have been very strange behavior for Kate to take a large box to the river and drop it in.
Yes, sir.
I'm sure you'd have mentioned it to someone if you thought there was anything odd happening. Your father, your mother, friends at work, perhaps.
Yes, sir.
Who did you tell about it?
Nobody, sir. Except the police.
Yes, but that was much later, wasn't it? On the 23rd, I believe. After you'd seen the box which had been dragged from the river at Barnes.
Yes, sir.
Until then, until you'd heard of these terrible events, which have received so much publicity in the newspapers, it never occurred to you for one moment to doubt that what Kate had told you was the truth.
No, sir.
Thank you.
And on this occasion, when the accused came round to tea with you unexpectedly, for after all, you hadn't seen her for several years...
I didn't recognise her at first, sir. She was that well dressed.
Indeed. Did she ask you to do anything for her?
She asked me if I knew anyone who might be interested in buying her home, sir.
Her home, you mean the house?
No, sir. Her home. The furniture.
I see. And could you help her?
Not then, sir. It was later I introduced her to Mr. Church.
And all this time she referred to herself as Mrs. Thomas.
That's what she called herself, yes, sir.
Tell me, why were you so willing to help her sell her possessions?
I thought she might pay me something. She looked well off.
Thank you. Now we can return to this mysterious box. When did you first hear about it?
I think that would be about the 9th, when they found the box in the river.
Did your son say anything at the time?
He told me about how he'd helped her with the box on the 4th.
I need hardly point out to the court that it has not been established for one moment that they were the same box. The inquest on the remains that were found in the box that was taken from the river was held on the 10th. Did you go to the authorities with your information?
Yes.
When?
I don't know.
Newspapers were full of reports of the inquest. You do read newspapers?
Yes.
Which?
Lloyd's, the London Illustrated News, the Graphic.
I'm very impressed.
I read the Graphic more than the others.
I'm sure the Graphic gave an even larger percentage of its space to reporting the inquest than the others. I repeat the question, when did you go to the authorities?
I don't know.
And I will tell you, Mr. Porter, you did not go to the authorities at all until you accompanied Mr. Church nearly 3 whole weeks later. Because you did not for a moment believe that the woman you knew as Kate, as a friend, as someone who used to play with your little daughter, you did not for a moment believe that she could be in any way connected with this horrible crime. Is that not the case?
Well, sir,
I have no further questions, Belida.
You are Mrs. Jane Ives, the owner of numbers 1 and 2 Mayfield Cottages. You live in number 1 and you rented out number 2 to Mrs. Thomas. Is that correct?
Quite correct.
When did you last see Mrs. Thomas?
On Saturday, the 1st of March. She was in her garden planting some flowers.
And the following Monday, did you see anything unusual taking place at number 2?
It wasn't so much that I saw anything, it was the smell.
Could you describe this smell to the court?
I have never encountered such a smell before. It was most unpleasant. I mentioned it to several people.
Did you notice anything else unusual taking place on that day?
The washing. I noticed that there was a great deal more of it than usual, and that it was hanging out to dry much earlier than usual, by 8 o'clock.
Did you observe anything else exceptional taking place on any of the subsequent days?
There was a continuous stream of people calling. This is most unusual. Mrs. Thomas rarely had visitors. Then on Tuesday, the 18th, I saw people starting to take furniture out of the house. I asked some man who was moving it what he was doing, and then that woman there...
The accused?
Yes, came and asked me what I wanted. I said I would like to know why the furniture was being moved. She said Mrs. Thomas had sold it all. I asked her where Mrs. Thomas was. She said, I don't know. She appeared very agitated. I asked her if she had an address for Mrs. Thomas, and she said no. I said I would look into it and close the door on her. I was most dissatisfied with her answers and her manner.
Just one question, Mrs. Ives. You say you were far from satisfied with the fact that the accused didn't tell you where her mistress was.
I was indeed.
Did you go to the police about it?
No.
Did you raise the matter with anyone else? For example, Mrs. Thomas's solicitor, whom you know, or any of her friends?
No.
You were sufficiently concerned to make an implied threat to a servant girl, but not sufficiently concerned to do anything about it. I see. Thank you, Mrs. Ives. I have no further questions.
Your solicitor to see you, Webster.
How are you feeling?
Well enough, thank you, sir.
Do sit down. You know that tomorrow the prosecution will be calling Mr. Church.
So they've told me.
He's going to deny everything that you said in your first statement. That it was he who murdered Mrs. Thomas.
He should be here now, instead of me. The innocent should not suffer for the guilty.
I have your statement here. The first. It's very convincing. It would make a very good impression in the court. The details.
Surely nobody would think I'd invented them.
You say you've known Church for 7 years. He'll deny that, of course.
He'll deny anything.
And then you say he suggested that you should poison Mrs. Thomas. Well, he certainly won't admit to that.
Well, he was drunk. Perhaps he doesn't even remember.
Then when you came back on the Monday night, the 3rd, you say you had to knock 3 times on the door.
Well, the light was down and no one answered.
Yeah. And then you say, Church opened the front door. I saw Mrs. Thomas lying on the mat in the passage, struggling and groaning, and he said, come in.
He pulled me inside.
Then he threatened you with a carving knife.
There was blood on it. Mrs. Thomas's blood.
How you took the box to Richmond Bridge with young Porter because you were frightened of Church.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, you make your own position very plain. I never laid a hand on Mrs. Thomas, but I knew that Church had done it. I intend to tell the whole truth, as I don't see why I should be blamed for what Church has done. I wouldn't accuse my greatest enemy of anything wrong, let alone a friend, which Church has been to me up till now.
Well, I thought he was a friend. Holy Mary, I thought he was a friend.
Well, the implication is fairly clear. He was your lover. From my own experience, it's the details that make your statement so convincing. For example, how you found the floorboards wet where Church had been, presumably washing away the blood. And the meat saw, clean, but in an unaccustomed place. How the only money in the house was 30 shillings and a £5 note, which you changed at the fishmonger's. It's convincing. There are discrepancies, but they're minor matters.
Well, I was upset. I was frightened. I told them the truth as I remembered it.
But then we come to the real discrepancy. Your second statement. Equally detailed, equally convincing. But in your second statement, you say that Porter was also in Mrs. Thomas's house at the time of the murder. That he was, at the very least, an accessory to murder. And you changed the day of the crime. In your first statement, you came home and found Church in the house on Monday the 3rd. And in the other statement, you say it was Sunday the 2nd. It'll be difficult to explain this in court.
Thank you.
Oh, good evening, Father.
Good evening, Mr. O'Brien.
She's expecting you.
Thank you. How is she?
Oh, perhaps you'll be able to help her more than I can.
Well, she needs the both of us.
On your feet, Webster.
No, don't stand for me, Kate.
Have you seen Patrick?
This morning, as I promised you.
How is he?
He's fine.
Did you give him a kiss for me, like I asked you, Father?
I did indeed. I don't know what he made of it, though.
How did he look?
You should be proud of him.
I am.
He's so tall. He's more like an 8-year-old than a 5-year-old.
He's only just 5.
Well, yes, so he told me. I brought him a sort of belated birthday present. Nothing much, just a little toy soldier.
Did he ask after me?
Of course. He always talks about you.
He still doesn't know?
No. Well, he's too young, anyway, to understand, I mean, even if anybody tried to tell him.
Oh, somebody will tell him.
Well, you'll tell him when you leave here.
Yeah. I just want to see him again.
Not here.
No. Not here. He's all I care about, Father.
Yes, I know.
It's a terrible thing to be left alone.
Yeah.
My own family, me parents, they must have seen what's happening to me. It's in all the papers and not a word from them. I only left Ireland at all because there was no food for us all. It wasn't that I didn't love them, Father.
No, I know that.
I was only a child. I stole because I didn't know any better. And then after Patrick was born and his father left me, I stole because my own baby was hungry and I hadn't enough food for him. 18 months hard labour I did because I tried to feed my own child.
Well, the law of man is inflexible. It is only God's law that is merciful.
And the other case, the one in Kingston, I swear before God I didn't do it. 12 months and I was innocent. A whole year when my son was growing up without me and without his father in the hands of strangers.
Yes, well, he's a fine boy. You shouldn't worry about him.
I've suffered all this. And now my own family disown me. Not a letter, not a message, nothing.
Well, I'll try and get in touch with them then, shall I?
It's no good now. It's too late. Pray for me, Father. You're all I have now.
I always pray for you, Kate.
You are John Church, licensee of the Rising Sun Public House in Hammersmith, where you have lived for 9 years.
I am, sir.
Before that, you were a gentleman's servant, and before that, you served in the army. Until 1866, you served with the 11th Hussars in India, and then you purchased your discharge. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Will you tell the court what you did on Sunday the 2nd and Monday the 3rd of March of this year?
On the Sunday, I was serving in the bar at the Rising Sun from 1 till 3, then again from 8 till 10. On the Monday, I got up about 10, did a bit of work about the house.
In the Rising Sun?
Yes, sir.
Continue, please.
In the evening, there was a meeting of the Oak Slate Club.
The Oak Slate Club?
Yes, my lord.
And what is the Oak Slate Club?
It's a sick and burial club, sir. I'm the treasurer. It meets at the Rising Sun the first Monday of every month.
I see.
Do you recall anybody who might remember your being in your public house on these 2 days?
The bar was full Sunday, sir. I can't remember them all, but they'd remember me.
And on the Monday, that is the evening of Monday, the 3rd of March?
Well, they were all the members of the club, sir.
Who presumably saw you?
Yes, sir, we keep records of who was present. Then, after closing time, that's 12:30, I went to bed.
And did you at any time during those 2 days leave Hammersmith?
No, sir. I didn't even leave the house.
When did you first meet the accused?
On Sunday the 9th, sir. She was in the front bar with Henry Porter and some others.
When did you next see her?
The day after that, sir. I went to Mayfield Cottages in the evening.
Why?
Well, Henry Porter had said that she'd got some pieces that she wanted to sell. He told me when he introduced her. So I thought I might buy them.
And when did you complete this transaction?
Well, on the Thursday morning, me and Henry saw Mr. Weston, and we arranged that we'd all meet.
Who is this Mr. Weston?
He's a greengrocer, sir. But he also moves furniture with his horse and cart.
I see.
Yeah, well, anyway, we got to Mayfield Cottages. Mrs. Thomas was there.
The woman you knew as Mrs. Thomas, the accused.
Yes, sir. I offered her £50 for the furniture. She wanted more, so we finally settled for 68.
You also visited Mayfield Cottages on the Friday, the Saturday, and the following Monday, the 17th.
Yes, sir.
To make the final arrangements about moving the furniture. Then, on the 18th, what happened?
Well, me and Mr. Porter and Mr. Weston and some of his men went with the accused to pick up the furniture, sir. That was in the evening. We was just starting to load up the cart when I heard someone say, "What do you think you're doing?" or something like that.
Who was this person?
The lady next door, sir. Mrs. Ives.
What did the accused do?
She said, "Oh, my God, that's my landlady. Leave this to me." And then she went out to talk to Mrs. Ives.
And what happened then?
Well, she came back in.
How did she appear to you?
She was all upset, sir.
Upset?
Yes, sir. So I told them to put the furniture back in the house.
Why did you do that?
I didn't want nothing to do with it, sir. I thought there was something wrong.
I see. And then?
We went home.
When did you next see the accused?
Not until after she was arrested, sir.
Did anything else occur that made you feel suspicious?
Well, the wife, Mrs. Church.
Oh, Mrs. Church will be giving evidence, my lord. Only it might expedite matters if I were to...
Proceed, Sir Hardinge. If the witness oversteps the rules of evidence, I will immediately intervene.
I am obliged, my lord. You may continue.
Well, she found this letter in one of the dresses that the accused had left at the Rising Sun, with the silver. It was from Mr. Manhennick.
I trust we are to learn who Mr. Manhennick is.
He is a friend of the murdered woman, my lord.
Ah.
Oh, it didn't seem like it had been written to the accused. I mean, I don't think she can read much. So I went with Henry Porter to see Mr. Manhennick in Finsbury. And from what he said, well, it was obvious that she wasn't really Mrs. Thomas.
Now, that was on the 21st, was it not?
Yes, the Friday.
And what did you do then?
Well, the next day, me and Henry Porter and Mr. Manhennick went to the police.
Whereupon a description of the accused was circulated throughout the United Kingdom. Now, as the court is aware, the accused was apprehended in Ireland at Killane on the 28th in the company of her son at the house of her uncle. She was then returned under arrest to Richmond and held at Richmond Police Station. Tell me, Mr. Church, did anything happen to you on the 30th?
Yes, sir. I was arrested and charged with murder. I went to the police station, where she was, and they read a statement to me.
In which she said that you had committed the murder and had forced her to help you.
Yes, sir.
How long were you remanded for?
2.5 weeks.
Who was responsible for your discharge?
I don't know. I don't know who arranges.
My lord, it was the Crown. It was clear that there was no case against Mr. Church. Thank you. That is all.
Mr. Slay?
Mr. Church, you clearly have a remarkable memory, so I shall tax it a little further. Where do you come from?
What do you mean?
I mean, where were you born, where were you brought up?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I can't remember.
I see. How old were you when you joined the army?
19, perhaps 20.
What did you describe yourself as when you joined the army?
I can't remember.
You say you had never seen the accused before the 9th.
Yes, sir.
She says she has known you for some 7 years and has been very close to you. You're saying your memory is better than hers. Very well. Let us take Tuesday the 11th. You have just told the court that you went to call upon the accused to look at her furniture in the evening.
Yes, sir. Between 5 and 7.
To tell the magistrate's court you were there from 4 to 9.
Well, I might be a bit wrong there.
Doesn't it seem strange to you, Mr. Church, that you should spend 5 hours alone in a strange house with a strange woman whom you'd only been introduced to 2 days earlier?
No, sir. I was looking at the furniture.
Ah, yes, the furniture. Yes, after this rather inconclusive conversation over the furniture, you took the accused to the railway tavern and brought her more drinks.
I don't remember.
But you just said you did. 5 minutes ago. In fact, for someone who didn't know the accused at all, you seem to have been remarkably hospitable. On the 11th, you drank with her at Mayfield and at the railway tavern. On the 12th, according to your statement, you and Porter and the accused went to a public house called the Thatched House and drank there. I presume she shared in these drinks?
Yes, sir.
On the 18th, when you finally started to move the furniture, did you have a drink with the accused while you were doing it?
Not just me. One of Mr. Weston's men had a drink too.
And you say Mrs. Ives, the landlady, appeared. You were so appalled by your suspicions that you abandoned the idea of buying the furniture and went home. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Straight home?
Yes, sir. I didn't want any part of it.
Or anything more to do with Kate Webster?
That's right, sir.
But in the magistrate's court, you said that you didn't go straight home. You said, in your own words, that you went to the pub round the corner for a drink.
Yeah, well, I had a drink first.
With Kate Webster?
Yes, sir.
That is, you say, last time you saw the accused until after her arrest. Must have saved you a great deal of money that you would have otherwise have spent on entertaining her. I notice you find it difficult to call her the accused. Normally called her Kate, didn't you?
No, sir.
But you did. My lord, the defense is willing to call witnesses that were proved conclusive.
I might have called her Kate.
Your memory, Mr. Church. I think it might help the court if I tried to establish how good it is. Your father now, what trade did he pursue?
I don't know, sir. I don't remember him.
Your mother?
She's living.
Where?
I don't know. I don't remember, sir.
Before you joined the army, had you been in any trouble?
No, sir. Well, I might have been in a few scrapes.
When you were serving in India, did you by any chance ever suffer from sunstroke?
No, sir, I didn't.
Proceed, Mr. Slay.
I have no further questions for this witness, my lord.
Oh, then I think we might adjourn for lunch.
Court will rise.
Good morning, Father.
Good morning, Mr. O'Brien. Well, you suddenly expose another side of Mr. Church.
He wasn't a very convincing witness, no.
Well, surely no one will believe a man who says he's forgotten practically everything that ever happened to him.
He's probably illegitimate and so chooses to forget his childhood.
Yes, but the other thing, saying he didn't know her even.
Suppose, in fact, he did have an affair with her. Not years ago, as she said, but since Porter introduced them. Is he going to tell the truth with his family sitting in the public gallery? And perhaps he is an inebriate and generally has large chunks of his life that he cannot account for.
It could be, Father, that you'll be the only person ever to know the whole truth.
What do you mean?
Well, you'll be taking her confession, won't you? I always gathered that in your church, your flock told you everything, and then you absolved them.
But only if they are truly penitent can they be absolved, and no priest can absolve anyone. It is God acting through the priest.
With respect, Father, how do you know if they're telling the truth?
But they must be telling the truth. It would be terrible blasphemy if they weren't. They'd be mocking the Holy Confessional. They'd be trying to use a priest to lie to God.
Yes.
Gentlemen of the jury, have you agreed upon your verdict? And do you find Catherine Webster guilty or not guilty of the willful murder of Mrs. Thomas?
Guilty.
Catherine Webster, you stand convicted of willful murder. Have you anything to say for yourself why the court should not give you judgment according to the law?
I didn't do it, my lord. Before God, I didn't do it. I'd like to say that when they came and took me, I was frightened. I said terrible things. I didn't know what I was saying. I blame Mr. Church and Mr. Porter, but they didn't have anything to do with it, sir, nothing. But I was tricked, sir. There's a man. He led me. He made me help him. He's the father of my little boy. He seduced me and then he left me. He left me and his own child to starve, for all he cared. I had to thieve to feed my son because his father, he's the one who did it. He's the one who's really guilty, and he isn't even here. Until this moment, I've loved him, but I don't see why I should suffer for what he did when I'm innocent.
Prisoner at the bar, after a long and painful inquiry, and after a powerful advocacy on your behalf, you have been found guilty of murder. It is my duty to pass upon you the sentence of the law.
Oyez, oyez, oyez. My lords, the Queen's justices do strictly charge and command all persons to keep silence while sentence of death is passing on the prisoner at the bar, on pain of imprisonment.
It is the sentence of this court that you be taken hence to the place from whence you came, and from thence to a place of execution, and that you be hanged by the neck until you are dead, and that your body be afterward buried in the precincts of the prison in which you shall be confined after your conviction. And may the Lord have mercy on your soul.
Amen.
Good evening, Father.
Good evening, Mr. O'Brien. Is there any news?
I don't know how much you know about the Home Secretary's letter. The Home Secretary regrets, etc.
So she's going to hang in the morning?
Yes, 9 o'clock. The crowds are already beginning to collect outside. You'll be taking her final confession.
Yes, that's right.
Well, there's something you ought to know. She's made another statement to me. Father, she admits to committing the murder. She says that Mrs. Thomas used to provoke her, never stopped criticizing her work, that sort of thing. And on the Sunday evening they had a row and she killed her. She seems to have been almost demented.
I did not murder Mrs. Thomas from any premeditation. I was enraged and in a passion. Something seemed to seize me at the time. But I am perfectly resigned to my fate. I die with great fortitude and confidence in my faith and in our blessed God, whom I beseech to have mercy on my soul. Well, that's what really matters.
There. Well done. We could play drafts if you like.
I told you I don't know how to play.
I could teach you.
How long will it take to learn?
Let's play cribbage again. See if I can get some of my money back.
It's Father Mannering.
We'll leave you, Father.
Thank you. Hello, Kate.
Father,
I read the statement. Mr. O'Brien gave it to me.
I asked him to.
You ready to make your final confession?
Bless me, Father, for I've sinned. Since my last confession, I've been in here and I haven't been saying my night prayers and that. The thing is, Father, all my life I've only confessed part of what I've done.
You must make a full confession now, Kate. This is your last chance.
Well, I first got into trouble in Ireland. They caught me thieving and I did my first time inside. Then I left Ireland for Liverpool. I think they were glad to see the back of me, my family. I changed my name. My real name's Catherine Lawler, but I called myself Webster after a sailor I got to know. I told everybody we were married and that I had 4 children by him, but I only knew him for a week. I needed another name, you see, Father. I used to live by thieving from lodging houses. Sometimes I'd take a room there, sometimes I'd just ask about a job. Either way, I'd be in and out in a day.
You were poor people, Kate. You were stealing from people who were as poor as you were.
And how would I get to know rich people, Father?
Yes.
Then they caught me again and I did 3 years. Then I moved to London. That's how I got to know the porters. I lodged next door. It was about that time I had Patrick.
And the father deserted you both.
Well, it wasn't quite like that. I wasn't sure who he was, you see. I committed sins of adultery and fornication, Father, many times. But he's a fine boy, Patrick.
Yes, he is.
That's what I'm most sorry for. Most of all, I could teach him so much. How to lead a good life. Not like the life I've led. Then they arrested me again and I did 12 months.
But that time you were innocent.
No. They only tried me for the half of it.
You swore before God that you were innocent.
I was upset. I didn't know what I was saying. I'm sorry, I really am.
Very well.
Then I got this job with Mrs. Thomas. All that jewellery. Gold, most of it. She had so much. It just lay there.
But in the statement you gave to Mr. O'Brien, you said that she provoked you and criticized your work all the time.
And that's the truth, Father. Picking on me. The girl she'd had before, none of them had stayed. But it didn't work with me. She couldn't frighten me. It was me that frightened her.
Yes, but at first you spoke very highly of Mrs. Thomas. You talked about how kind she was to you.
Well, I had to, didn't I?
Why?
Well, I had to stay there long enough.
Long enough for what?
For her to give me a reference, Father. What else could it be? But I was watching her. She was trying to get up the courage to dismiss me. And then she does it. It was as if she was begging me a favor. She says, please, would I go on Friday? And I says I'd go, but you can't get a new job on a Friday, so I'd leave on the Monday. You should have seen her. She was dismissing me, but it was me telling her when I'd go. On Saturday, she was out in the garden all day because she was frightened to come into her own house. On Sunday, I went out and had a few drinks. Perhaps had a few too many. Anyway, I came back and there she was, all in her best clothes. And she picked on me, Father. She said I was late and so she'd be late for church. Well, I told her a few things, Father. I told her what I thought of her. She sort of backed away from me, you know. She was shaking. While she was out at church, I lit the fire under the copper. I'd lit the lamp so she wouldn't suspect anything, and when she came back into the house, she didn't see me downstairs, so she went upstairs to her bedroom and locked the door. She was frightened of me, you see. But I was in the bedroom already, waiting for her. She heard me and started to turn, so I hit her with the axe. It went here, all this side of her face, it opened up. It was a terrible lot of blood, Father. Then I pulled her downstairs. She was a great weight. And I put her on the kitchen table. I remember as a child once we killed a pig, and when we'd opened up the pig and all its guts fell out, and the blood, it was nothing to what it was like with her.
Kate, what you were telling me is the most dreadful thing I've ever heard.
While I was cutting her open, she made this noise. I'll never forget it, Father.
But she was alive.
Her eyes were moving. So I put my hands round her throat. I've always been strong. And then I cut her up and put her in the copper. The smell was terrible. But I couldn't open the windows or everybody would know. All night I was at it. I was half dropping asleep over her, but I had to go on. There was so much blood, you see. All the blood and the bones. Twice I fell asleep. I was so tired. Then in the morning I'd done most of the cleaning and I put out the washing. I started to try to get rid of her. There were parts of her, honestly, I can't remember how I got rid of them, and that's the truth. There was this big box. She used to keep blankets and things in it. I put a lot of her body in that. Then I fell asleep again. I was so tired, you see. In the afternoon, I put her head in a bag and I went to see the porters. I didn't know anybody else, you see. We were sitting there having tea.
Kate, this is your final confession. Is what you were telling me the truth?
I wouldn't lie to you, Father. Not now.
You were telling me that when you went to have tea with your friends, you took...
In the bag, Father. You wouldn't have believed it. We were sitting there having tea and the bag was on the floor by the table. It was a velvet bag and the blood was soaking through, so the plush was getting flattened. I don't know what made me do it. I said to Henry Porter, I think there's something leaking in my bag. And you know, he didn't even ask me what it was. I don't know what I'd have said if he had asked me.
Why did you do these things?
Do you know, I was taking the risk. When we were walking home, Robert was carrying the bag for me, and I was half frightened he'd ask me what was in it, and half hoping he would. Can you understand that, Father?
No, I can't understand that.
And when we got home, Robert was sitting there and I was sitting where she used to sit, and I kept saying things, I kept hinting. I said, wouldn't he like to look around the house? Because if he had, he'd have realised he must have done. I mean, there were still bones and things that I hadn't had time to get rid of. He just went on drinking, and then he fell asleep in the chair.
I don't know what to say to you. I don't know what to say.
You see, after I'd done it, after I killed her, well, I had all her money and her jewellery and that. I could have just taken it and gone away. I could have been in America by now and they'd never have found me. But you see, I saw Mr. Church and his pub and his friends, and I saw the Porters sitting in their nice home, and I just wanted to mix them all up in it too. Carrying her head in the bag and the box and buying all the furniture. How could they have talked their way out of that?
I don't know what to say. But why did you do these things?
I enjoyed it, Father.
You enjoyed it?
When I got rid of her, there was still the fat in the copper. She was a big woman, Father. There was a lot of fat. So I cleaned out the copper and I put the fat in 2 bowls. I went outside with it. I was going to bury it, I think. I can't really remember. Anyway, I saw Mrs. Hayhoe. She's the wife of the man who runs the pub just up the road. And I sold them to her. She paid me 2p a bowl, and I said it was best dripping.
What you have told me, I pray that it isn't true.
But it is true, Father. Every word of it.
Then you are in terrible danger. Unless you are truly penitent, your soul is damned. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, Father.
If you are truly penitent, then even at the last moment, even at the moment you die, God can forgive you, but not unless you are truly penitent.
I know, Father, and I am penitent. I'd do anything to undo what I've done.
Yeah, but you can't. Only in your soul can you undo that. You see, you must understand you are going to be hanged. And you must make your peace with God now, because it's your only chance, and you must understand that. It is the most important moment of your life, however terrible, however wicked, all the things you've done, all the things you have told me. Even now, God in his infinite mercy can forgive you, but not unless you are truly penitent. What happens to your soul throughout all eternity depends upon your penitence now.
I know, Father, I was brought up in the Holy Church.
And you must be penitent because of the suffering you have given to God. Do you understand? If you are contrite because you are afraid of hell...
I'm not afraid of hell, Father.
Well, we should all be afraid of hell.
If you say so, Father.
True penitence, it is not because of fear, it is because of love. It is because God, your Father, loves you and you have offended him terribly. You are contrite because you know how you have hurt God. If it is only because you are frightened, then it is not perfect penitence. Do you understand?
Yes, Father. And I am penitent. In God's holy name, I'm truly penitent.
Yes, but you have used his holy name before, and... Well, what do you want of me?
I want absolution, Father. Isn't that what you came here for?